please put your hands together for Leah Carey?
My therapist said to me, "We have 15 minutes left before you're done for good. You've done really great work, and you're about to go on this amazing cross-country journey to find a new place to live. Are there any last little things that you want to talk about before we're complete?" And I gathered up my courage to say that thing that I hadn't been saying for so long. When I have sex, I don't have sexual sensation. And she looked at me and she said, 15 minutes is not really enough time to get into that. And that's not my area of expertise. But you're about to go on this incredible adventure, and I bet that somewhere along the way, you're going to meet a person or have an experience that's going to let you begin to dive in and explore this. And you know, she was right. I did not need her to therapize me on this. What I needed was for her to not laugh at me. I needed her to give me permission to see myself as something other than broken. Because I had seen myself as broken my whole life. My dad, and let me just pause here for a second and tell you my dad is not the villain in this story. He was kind of shitty, but I've done a lot of therapy, and I understand that he was doing the best he could because he had really shitty parents too. So anyway, during my tween years, which was not a thing then, but and my teen years, he told me in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different words, that I was fat and ugly and no one would ever love me. He also told me that he was going to have to lock me in my room until I was 30, and that he would break the kneecaps of any boy who expressed interest in me. Which was confusing. Was I completely undesirable? Or was I so desirable that I had to be protected from everyone who saw me? So what to do? Well, what I did was I hid. Internally, I was boy crazy, and eventually girl crazy too. But on the outside, I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't flirt. I didn't do any of the things. I didn't have my first real relationship until I was 25. I didn't have sex for the first time until I was 25. And as the cliche goes, what you learn from your dad, you're likely to do with your boyfriend too. So I chose a boyfriend who also told me that I was fat and ugly and unlovable. There was this one day we're walking down the street of Manhattan. He knows I have really significant body image issues. And he sees this woman coming toward us, this young woman, lovely, short little crop top, really flat stomach, short shorts. And he pulls me in close, and he whispers in my ear, "I want to come on her stomach." Yeah, exactly. I mean, I felt less than human. We dated for 2 years. Yeah. And during those 2 years, I cried every time we had sex because it hurt so much. Now I understand that it hurt because I wasn't turned on, and therefore I wasn't getting lubricated. But at the time, I just thought I was broken. And he didn't even notice that I was crying. He never said anything. Except that one time when I was crying quietly into the pillow after sex. And he said, "You know, I wish you wouldn't cry when we have sex. It's really not a turn on." Yeah. So my mom and my friends were all like, get out now! And eventually I did. But it's easier to leave behind the relationship than it is to leave behind all of the messages and the beliefs that got me into the relationship to begin with. And so I got into kind of that same relationship over and over. Until this day, when my therapist said to me that she saw me as capable of being something other than broken. And so I started to read all of the books. And this was a really big deal because until this day, I had been terrified to walk into Barnes & Noble and walk up to the human sexuality shelf because I was afraid that the lights would start flashing and the horns would start blaring and someone would come over the loudspeaker and go, "You do not belong here." But now I'm going to the bookstore and I'm buying the books. And I'm listening to the podcasts, and I'm like a sponge for everything about positive sexuality. And I learn that the reason that I'm not having sexual sensation is probably because I was never relaxed. I never felt safe. So I went on Craigslist Personals. Yeah. When I make a decision, I go all in. And I met this guy named Matt. And we have a coffee date to make sure that this is okay. It's clearly just gonna be about sex. We're not dating. And he walks in, and he is tall and dark and gorgeous, like punk rock vibe, totally in his body, 15 years younger than me. And I'm like, yeah, he is not going to be interested in me at all. But he was. Yeah. And I'm kind of an all cards on the table kind of girl. And so I said to him, so I'm working through old trauma. And I'm really trying to reconnect with myself and with my sexuality. And you seem like the kind of guy who would be really good at helping a woman to do this. Would you be interested? And he immediately said yes. So the next day, we're on a bed, clothes are coming off. And I'm having this feeling. Like it's not quite sensation yet, but it's the feeling like sensation might be there. And he looks at me and he says, "What do you want? What do you really, really want?" Big question. And so I gather up all of my courage to say that thing that I haven't been saying for so long. I tell him, "I want you to touch me without expectation of reciprocation. I want to take my genitals off the table for a while, and I don't want to have to touch your penis until I'm absolutely ready. I want to wait until I can't wait anymore. Is that okay?" And he looked at me and he said, "Honey, that's what consent means." So here's the question. How did I get to age 43 and not know what consent means? I thought I had been consenting all along because I never said no. But I don't think I'd actually ever said yes. And he ever so gently ran his fingertips over my skin exactly the way that I wanted it. And it was like fucking fireworks. He stroked my back, and it was like every nerve ending was on fire. I was having sensation. And then I got overwhelmed. And I started to cry. Because my brain and my body, they are not used to this shit. And he stopped what he was doing, and he wrapped me up in his arms, and he held me until I calmed down, and I was ready to start again. And we went through this cycle. He touched me. I had sensation. I got overwhelmed. I cried. He held me. Over and over for 3 or 4 hours. That afternoon with Matt was pretty transformational for me. It opened my eyes to the possibility that I was capable of sensation. And I have been exploring this territory ever since, doing this dance with sensation. And I talk about it pretty publicly, and so a lot of other women have started telling me their stories and talking to me about how do I figure out what I really, really want, and then how do I speak it so that I can get it. And recently, I was interviewing this woman, Tanisha, for my podcast, Good Girls Talk About Sex. And she knew my story, and she asked me, How did you go from this trauma to being healed? And I knew that there was more, like she wanted to say more words, but I had to stop her because I think it's the wrong question. It sets up this idea that there is something called broken and there's something called healed. I don't think that's true. I am neither broken nor healed. I, like all of us, am somewhere on those 10,000 steps in between. I'm 10 steps further down that road than I was a few years ago. And I hope that a few years from now, I'll be another 10 or 20 steps down that road. But healed? I don't think that's the goal. Little steps each day toward healing. That's the goal.